What is up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Somewhat Sports Podcast. My name is Chris, and I'm joined by two of the greats in this industry, Jurg and Dame. How are we, fellas? It's been like 2 months since we recorded last, but yeah, it's time to resurrect this defunct podcast. Fellas, how are we this week?
Defunct. That's it. It does feel like it, even though we did only take a week off. We all decided to give ourselves a break, and Dame had no issue with it. It was another week of beach going and fun for him. But we're back. The boys are back. It has been a while since it's been the three of us. I'm happy. It's always better when we're together, lads.
Yeah, it's literally been a month since I've been on because I had the Vegas thing, and I
Mm-hmm.
got kicked out, and then we just decided to take a week off.
Kicked out.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm doing good, doing a lot better. Home alone all week.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Sweet.
Everyone's in Florida without me.
Nice. Oh, that's why. I was like, why are you in your brother's room without him like going off on you?
Yeah.
Well, that's enough out of Damien's personal life, but yeah, he's back after a month hiatus. Some would groan about it. Some would be content with it. I'm not gonna say names. I'm not gonna name names, but you guys could do the math. But anyway, yeah, it has been a relatively dry, I would say, a dry phase in the sports world. Uh, there is some stuff happening in the NHL world because Jerk notifies us and he will talk about all the news. But NBA is drier than the Sahara Desert. There's nothing going on. The Donovan Mitchell news has been hit a wall. The Kevin Durant trade rumors have hit a wall. There's just nothing going on in the NBA. I hope that picks up. NFL, you know, not as dry, but still relatively dry. I think training camp started yesterday. Um, Julio Jones signed with the Bucs. I guess if you guys want to talk about that briefly before we get into our main event, but yeah, not a lot happening. But couldn't afford 2 weeks, off from the podcast, so we're gonna decided to steal. We decided to steal some ideas from Jurg's other podcast and gonna make it into our own. Because what are they gonna do? You're gonna sue us? You're gonna sue? No, it's not happening. Uh, and we're lucky because we got Jerk for it. And Jerk's a whore. He's a podcast whore. Dude's whoring up for both podcasts. So we're gonna slut him out for this one, and we're gonna use him. But we got NHL news. If you guys want to talk about Julio Jones to the Bucs briefly, I guess we will. And then we are going to basically give our thoughts on NFL divisions. That's right. So we're gonna do two each week leading up to the season. One from the AFC and then one from the NFC. This week we'll be tackling the North, so the AFC North and the NFC North. We're just gonna give a rundown of what we think of the teams going into the season. Maybe we'll talk about if we're bullish or bearish on them. Who knows? Who knows? We'll
With the
see.
return.
If you guys want to, I know Damon doesn't want to, but
What?
because I know you're not gonna bring it up. You're just gonna be like, yeah, they're good. I am high on them. You're not gonna bring up the two words that I want, so I'm not gonna call it bullish or bearish. If they pop up, if those two words are mentioned, then W. If they're not, then whatever. We move. But yeah, that's the rundown for this week. NHL, Julio Jones, AFC North / NFC North talk. Yeah, all right, let's get down to it. It's 3 minutes and 43 seconds of an intro. It's kind of disgustingly long. But Jurg, as always, we start off with the best, which is you. You have NHL news. Talk to us.
Well, Chris, I'll say for the record, I've done long intros before, so you're not alone. You're not
Nice.
alone in that endeavor, my friend. But yes, ladies and gentlemen, after a week off, and I wasn't disappointed, like because last week was a slow news week, like Chris said. Like I think even the Kyler Murray news would have broken after we would have recorded the podcast, so it was just a slow week that we decided not to. I was again not disappointed, but I had really wanted to talk about the big trade that happened. I think. And from what I've heard from some people, the biggest trade that has happened in the NHL salary cap era in quite some time occurred last week. But not former top restricted free agent Matthew Tkachuk, who I had mentioned in the last couple of weeks, was talking about the upcoming NHL free agency and it's starting and who's been signed so far. The fact that Tkachuk, being an RFA, had a career year for himself, 100 plus points, 40 plus goals. He was an RFA, and in the NHL, RFAs are a interesting situation because teams tend to leave other teams' RFAs alone. But it became very evidently clear, especially after Johnny Gaudreau left, that Matthew Tkachuk no longer wanted to be a Calgary Flame. He wanted to leave Calgary. He wanted to leave Canada as a whole, and he wanted to go somewhere else to get his money. And lo and behold, the Flames more than acquiesced Even though he did not have it, Matthew Tkachuk gave them a list of teams that he would go to that the connotations were that he would definitely sign long term with them. And from that list bore, a pretty good trade package for the Calgary Flames for now. But let me spare no details about it. The Calgary Flames traded Matthew Tkachuk to the Florida Panthers in exchange for Jonathan Huberdeau, defenseman Mackenzie Weegar, a prospect, and a 2025 first-round pick with the condition that it could become a 2026 first-round pick. To say the least, this was a shocking transaction, more so in regards to the fact of who the Florida Panthers ended up giving up for Tkachuk. So just looking at it from that perspective first, Tkachuk going to Florida, again, he had a career year last year, and now he goes to a team that has an Alexander Barkov manning the middle, that has some pretty good offensive players on it, as well as a couple pretty good blue liners, Aaron Ekblad being the big name. The Panthers were the President's Trophy winners last year. They were a outstanding team, but they got swept in the second round. And to a lot of people, part of the reason why people thought that they were so outmatched by Tampa was because they weren't physical enough. And Matthew Tkachuk is certainly a physical player, as well as just being a supremely offensively talented skill player, to say the least. Upon the trade, Tkachuk agreed to an 8-year extension with the Calgary Flames. So the whole thing was that I don't think the Panthers could have offered him the contract extension right after the trade. So he extended with Calgary and then got traded to Florida. So he signed his 8-year deal with the Calgary Flames before being traded to Florida. At least I rely on Cap Friendly personally for all my NHL contract things, and the team that it says signed him to that 8-year deal is Calgary, and then he was immediately traded. So I'm going to go with Cap Friendly says at the end of the day. But Tkachuk being moved, big time trade by the Florida Panthers right there to bring in such a young player. You're going to get him throughout the entirety of his peak years. At pretty good value, $9.5 million a year cap hit. I actually don't think it's too bad if he's going to continue being a 100-point player or close to it. And you get a really great winger to be on that top pair with Barkov for a very long time to come. Now, the interesting part of this trade with the Panthers was giving up Jonathan Huberdeau. Jonathan Huberdeau, who's been with that franchise for, I think, a decade or close to a decade at this point since he was drafted into the league. He was even referred to by those in the front office as like the team's MVP last season. He a all-time Panthers player. Like legitimately, I don't think it's overstating that Jonathan Huberdeau last season easily had the greatest season of any Florida Panthers player in history because he was second in the league in scoring. He was very close to winning the Art Ross. But he, like on paper, he's probably the best player to ever play in a Panthers uniform in regards to what his tenure there, his accomplishments, how productive he was, etc. So for them to trade him, in this trade shocked a lot of people. He does have a year left going into unrestricted free agency next year, and he's quite a few years older than Tkachuk. So I think that's part of the reason. But Jonathan Huberdeau being traded, he was the second point scorer in the league last season, was definitely surprising. The Panthers, like I said, also traded Mackenzie Weegar, a very good defenseman who again, he is going into unrestricted free agency next year. So the fact that they trade those two guys to the Calgary Flames, as well as just a first-round pick, which I think for Calgary is not a bad haul at the end of the day because of the position they were in, where Tkachuk, yes, he's an RFA, and yes, he could technically re-sign with the team, but all intents and purposes were he just wanted to get out, and even if you could have convinced him to stay, it wouldn't have been for long-term. He would have wanted to get just the hell up out of there as quick as can be. So I think for the Flames, this is not bad, but at the same time, it also very highly depends on can you re-sign Huberdeau and Weegar. This is a very high risk and very high reward trade package. If you can convince Huberdeau and Weegar to re-sign, you get two really good players on your team. Weegar makes a already pretty solid blue line even better. Huberdeau can replace some of the production, at least on paper. He's not the same player type like a Tkachuk is, but he's got that offensive pop still. He can be on that top line with this team. They still have some potential here because the Pacific Division is so wide open to make the playoffs this season, and maybe a good regular season would convince both those guys to stay. But like I said, they're both UFAs, and if they both end up leaving, all you really got then was just that future first-round pick and a prospect that's not even like the highest graded prospect. That's tough for the Calgary Flames. So a very much high risk, high reward deal here for the Flames as they trade Tkachuk and they lose 2/3 of their just absolutely elite top line that they had leading the way last season. Aside from that, and of course that was the monumental trade in and of itself, we still have quite a few, news breaking caliber moments awaiting in the NHL because free agency is still ongoing and there are still some big names yet to be signed. It's kind of like a holding pattern right now. I'm sure I think we've talked about this on the show, and like maybe not this year, but in past like NBA or NFL free agencies, boys, where there's a player that once that player is signed or moved or whatever, like everything else follows. That right now is kind of the holding pattern with a Nazem Kadri. Right now, Nazem Kadri is still a free agent. He's the top remaining forward on the market, probably the top remaining player on the market overall. And the wait is still on to see well, not if anyone has offered him, but if he's going to accept the offer from another team, or if he is just personally waiting to see if the Colorado Avalanche can make enough cap space for their books to be able to re-sign him. And then I think from there, a lot of other transactions are going to go down, such as John Klingberg with the Boston Bruins. I think, well, I don't know if they're waiting on Kadri necessarily, but they haven't officially signed Bergeron and Krejci yet, because the speculation has been for the last couple of weeks that both those guys are going to, return to Boston. Um, you have a couple potential teams that, well, actually no, let me rephrase that. You have teams that do need to make trades because right now teams are over the salary cap, and in the NHL you're allowed to be over the salary cap during this portion of the offseason, but you do eventually have to get under. And if you don't have long-term injury reserve to play with, you do need to make a deal. So actually, like the Florida Panthers, for example, are a team that do need to end up making a deal. The Calgary Flames, not because they're over, they could still end up making a deal here because of what they got back, and maybe they could make a move or two. I think there are a couple teams in both conferences that can make moves. And like I said, teams that have to make trades, like the Toronto Maple Leafs, for example, are going to be notorious. Like they're going to need to try to make trades. And I think they're one of the teams being held up by the whole Nazem Kadri situation. I think like once Kadri is moved, I think they'll be able to offload some of the salary that they need to in order to both get under and also re-sign one last defenseman on their team. But yeah, that's the holding pattern in the NHL right now. Waiting on the next big domino to fall, and then other things will happen. I think John Klingberg is going to be re-signed. I think a couple RFA deals are going to get done here once Nazem Kadri is re-signed. I know the Dallas Stars, they have to handle Jake Ottinger's and Jason Robertson. I think they're trying to figure out the situation there. Um, no, Pierre-Luc Dubois did. He agreed to a qualifying offer, I think, with Winnipeg. And Columbus did re-sign Patrick Laine to a 4-year deal. Just days, well, actually, week and a half after signing Johnny Gaudreau. So that's really the news dump in the NHL right now. Just things are in a holding pattern, and once that next domino falls, boys, we're gonna really start to see because it's a later offseason than normal, a later free agency than normal. Like that's why there's still some news, and it feels weird to be going into August to have this kind of potential news for the NHL because it never happens. But hey, I'll take advantage of it while I can. I'll gladly enjoy hockey being brought up any which way. But yeah, that just about does it for this NHL news dump.
Beautiful. Beautiful as always, Jurg. Yeah. It seems like NHL is kind of carrying the sports world on its back, especially with how dry it is these days. So shout out to the NHL. Shout out to our Ice Prince. Yeah, so we move on over to, I guess, a minor story. Well, minor or major, depends how you take it. Julio Jones signs with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, guys, I think, everyone's kind of been speculating where Julio Jones would go for a while now. I was kind of surprised that it took him this long to sign with the team, but maybe he wanted to, wait for the market to clear, maybe wait till training camp started, so I kind of get the wait a little bit. But I thought for sure, I thought you would kind of lean towards signing with the Colts, reunite with Matt Ryan, and also they kind of need some wide receivers on that team. And then I kind of heard of the Green Bay Packers, which makes sense, especially with the loss of Devontae Adams. But no, he signs with the Bucs. He's gonna play with Tom Brady. It's not like he made a bad choice, but it was kind of out of left field to me a little bit. But now that I look at it, I'm just like, yeah, of course he'd sign with the Bucs. Of course he would. Tom Brady and Julio Jones wants his ring, so he's gonna be competing for one. But yeah, I don't know. What do we make of this signing? Dane, let me start off with you. What do you make of this for Julio Jones? Obviously, the Bucs are going to be without Chris Godwin for a while. So you obviously understand why the Bucs went out to get him, and you give Tom Brady an extra weapon. But what do you make of this deal for Julio Jones, and what do you make of it for the Tampa Bay Bucs as well?
Tom Brady just can't get enough help. Clearly, it's more and more every year. But for Julio Jones, my opinion when he first became a free agent was I thought he was going to sign with the 49ers. I thought that was a really good spot for them because they truly don't have that number one receiver. I know people are going to say Debo, but I don't view Debo as that number one outside kind of receiver. He's like everyone calls him. He's like a wide back where he plays kind of running back, wide receiver. He's not that guy that's going to go get the ball. He kind of give it to him in space and he makes things happen himself, but they don't have that big outside threat for the red zone and stuff. So I thought Julio Jones to the Niners would have been a really good fit. But I'm not shocked at all that he went to the Bucs. Tom Brady always looking for more help, no matter what. Especially Rob Gronkowski retired. That was a big red zone threat, and Chris Godwin obviously out, so that hurts the wide receiver group. So of course he goes out and recruits the best wide receiver left. Julio Jones, I'm not surprised he did go there because he's obviously trying to win a championship. He's made it to the Super Bowl, but he's never won one. So obviously going to the Bucs and playing with the greatest quarterback ever is going to increase his chances to do that. For the Bucs, though, I really do like it because, like you said, Chris Godwin's out. Like I said, Gronk retired. So having Mike Evans and Julio Jones opposite sides of each other, those are two really big, strong receivers. That's going to be really hard for cornerbacks to match up with. Most teams don't have two big cornerbacks that can line up with a big receiver. Usually it's just one. So it's going to be really hard for teams to match up with that. However, a lot of it's going to come down to Julio Jones' health. That's what it's been the past few years. He's been the best wide receiver in the league for a while until injuries kind of caught up to him. And every single year it's on and off with the injuries. He says he's 100% healthy, but that's what all guys say when they're actually hurt. So we'll wait and see with that. But as long as he stays healthy, I think he's going to be dangerous for that team. And he's going to be a big weapon for Tom Brady and the Bucs.
I mean, I think you said it within your thoughts there, Dame. I don't think Julio is necessarily a replacement for Chris Godwin. I think he's more of a replacement for Gronk because at the end of the day, that big body, like you just throw it to him and Brady's confident he's going to catch it if he puts it within their radius. I think that's what Julio's for. I'm not saying he's going to line up at tight end, mind you, but I just think the role that Gronk really played in of being that just elite red zone threat, which even in his later years, he always was that. I think that's what Julio's for. Like you said, just not enough teams have enough in their defensive backfields to be able to match up to those guys, this caliber of guys height-wise. And that's what you have on this team right now because you have Cameron Brate, you have Mike Evans, you have Julio Jones. Like, those are all tall players. And not everyone has the speed to deal with them. So I think that's really what Julio Jones' addition was for. Like you said, how successful will this be? It all comes down to Julio Jones' health. That's the biggest question mark. He's been hurt the last couple seasons, especially last year. I think, like, from looking back, I think Julio really tried to play through pain a lot, and I don't think that obviously didn't help him in the long run. And I think this is going to be good for him because I think now that he's had this offseason to rest, I think he'll be a little bit better than what we saw last season. Like you said, Dame, this is one of the greatest wide receivers we've seen come in the NFL over the last decade or so. This is a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer trying to add one last thing to his legacy before he goes, right? Like, and we saw Odell Beckham Jr. get a Super Bowl this past season. We saw Antonio Brown win a Super Bowl before him. Like, some of the notable wide receivers of the recent years have actually started to win a couple championship here, and Julio Jones wants to add his name to that list, and this is not a bad way to do it. Like, obviously it makes sense what we talked about before, Chris, maybe with the Colts with the Matt Ryan connection, or maybe with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay for opportunity. But at the end of the day, he sees Tom Brady and he says, I got a chance at another ring here, let's just go after it. I don't blame the guy at all. And especially, I mean, Dame kind of joked about it, but Brady, he'll be the first ever 45-year-old quarterback. This is going to be really interesting to see like how he performs. I think this will be the telltale sign of how many more seasons he's going to play this year, based on how he looks this season. I'm not just talking about like raw counting numbers. I'm talking about like a couple individual performances, and a Julio Jones will definitely be a big help for that offense this season, especially new head coach Todd Bowles.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot Todd Bowles is their head coach. Yeah. Any final thoughts on this? I mean, is there anything else we could say about it?
Not really.
No. Okay. Well, Tom Brady once again. Just man, I hope he loses this season. I hope Tom Brady doesn't win a chip this year. Anyway, yeah, hopefully. But okay, let's move on over to our final segment. We're going to talk about some divisions this week in the NFL. We have all decided as a group to go through the North, the AFC North, the NFC North. Now, guys, I think it would just make sense from a business standpoint to start off with the NFC North. And then we finish off with the main event, which is the AFC North, because I think the AFC North is a lot more competitive. But yeah, let's just run by some teams here. We're gonna run by the teams, and we're gonna basically give our thoughts on them. Do you guys want to go one by one, or do you guys want to you want me to just bring up all the teams, and then we could just kind of discuss after?
One at a time, I think.
Okay. All right. So let's start off with the NFC North. Now I'm going to start from the bottom, actually. Now, guys, I think we're all in agreement here. Chicago Bears. Are we in agreement that they're going to be like a top 5 worst team in the NFL this year, or am I bugging out?
I think so. I
Dame.
don't think there's disagreement.
I haven't really looked at the bad teams, but I think they'll be bad. But I don't think they'll be a top 5 bad team. Like
All right. So they hired a new coach. I think it's Matt Eberflus, Jerg.
Eberflus.
Eberflus, sorry, my bad. Yeah. So Matt Eberflus is their head coach. They got rid of Matt Nagy. They finally are gonna focus on building their offense around Justin Fields, their quarterback, and not Andy Dalton. They lost Allen Robinson to in free agency, and they traded for N'Keal Harry. Actually, this is like a minor story, I think, last week. But yeah, guys, I don't know. It's going to be difficult for the Chicago Bears to win games. Look, I get it. They're in a rebuild team. They're a rebuilding team, but I don't know. I just can't see this team, winning a lot of games this year. I think they're the worst team in this division, weirdly enough. And we're gonna get to a team that I'm very bullish on this year, but I don't have high expectations of the Bears. Any of you guys want to comment? Do you agree that they're gonna be the worst team in this division, or?
Yeah, I'll run through this one real quick. Yeah, I think it's a consensus that the Bears are going to be the worst team in the division for the most part. Year one with under Matt Eberflus and trying to figure out the offense, and also like they didn't make a lot of additions this offseason to help out Justin Fields skill position wise. Like he lost Allen Robinson. Everyone aside from Allen Robinson last year was a question. Even Cole Kmet, I think he had 0 touchdowns last season.
They didn't even use Allen Robinson, Jerg, right? Like he
nope,
was used so poorly.
He's so underrated. They fucking suck.
Well, I mean, I have said on the show, and finally my prayers were answered, that Allen Robinson would leave and finally go to a real quarterback. Once again, remember in his career, Allen Robinson has been thrown to by Blake Bortles, Nick Foles, and Mitch Trubisky, and Andy Dalton. Do I really need to say any more? And now he's got Matthew Stafford. I'm not going to lump Justin Fields in that cavalcade of schmucks, because I don't think it's his fault what last season was. Matt Nagy literally sent him to die. Like he sent a pig to be slaughtered when he put him up against the Browns in his first career game, and he got sacked 9 times. So I think the Bears, not enough offensive improvements were made. I think if you're a Bears fan, you need to hope that Justin Fields just improves in like the regular numbers, look more comfortable on the field, better completion percentage, less learn from the rookie mistakes. Of course, he's gonna have some sophomore growing pains, but show that he's made some strides and maybe he can get a connection with Matt Eberflus. I think this is low-key a big year for Justin Fields, just because this wasn't the regime that drafted him, and that always comes with the territory of a young quarterback that gets drafted and the regime that drafted him gets fired. So I hope the best for Justin Fields personally, but because he did not deserve what's happened to him so far.
I agree, Jerg. I think I'm rooting for him too. I think we all are. I think we're big Justin Fields guys. This year's also going to be tough for him, just because they're going to suck. I think he has to wait like another year for they're going to get a high draft pick. Did they have a first round draft pick this year?
This
No,
year,
right?
Yes,
no, the Giants had their
this
pick.
past year, no.
Yeah, because I think they traded it to get Justin Fields, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So, I knew it was clipped. But yeah, I mean, I guess N'Keal Harry was a fake move to kind of, because that wide receiver depth is god awful. But
I was just about to say, Chris, you know how it's clipped for this team? Their number one receiving option might be N'Keal Harry. God bless us all.
I feel bad. I feel real bad. Dame, any comments?
So I mean, I really thought maybe the Lions would be the worst team, and then they came out with a graphic the other day. I think like PFF or whatever. They came out with the wide receiver group for the Bears, and my God, is it awful. Someone like quote tweeted, it's like an All-American roster or something like that on the TV show. But it's so bad, and that's the complete opposite way of how you're supposed to develop your quarterback. I'm not saying the Jets are going to be this spectacular team, but you see the way Joe Douglas is building that roster and how he's building a core of young weapons around Zach Wilson, a strong offensive line, strong weapons on the outside, strong running backs as well. He's putting everything around Zach Wilson possible to make sure he has as much help as possible to see what kind of quarterback he really is. With Justin Fields in Chicago, on the other hand, he could have a bad year and you still won't know if he's your franchise quarterback, because He has no offensive line. He has David Montgomery, fine, but he has no wide receivers, no tight end. Like, it's going to be really hard for the Bears to evaluate if Justin Fields is going to be that quarterback going forward for them. And on the other hand, with the Lions, I do like what they're doing. They have DeAndre Swift back there. They obviously don't have a quarterback yet. They have Jared Goff. He's kind of their bridge guy until they find their franchise quarterback. But they are building an offense for when they do find their quarterback. They're going to bring that quarterback in. He's going to have a stable offense going forward. They obviously have a good offensive line. They drafted Penei Sewell last year. They traded up all the way from 32 to 12, I believe, to get Jameson Williams, the fastest guy in the draft, who guys are comparing to Tyreek Hill. You have Amon St. Brown from last year. You have T.J. Hawkinson. You have a bunch of young weapons in this offense that when you do finally find that franchise QB, you'll be able to bring him into a good situation. He'll be able to develop the right way, and you'll be able to really evaluate him and see if he's the guy moving forward. But even just for now, like, Jared Goff is not a bad quarterback. I think right now at the current time, he's a better quarterback than Justin Fields. And obviously with the better weapons, I think Dan Campbell's a fantastic coach, better than the Chicago coach. So I think the Lions definitely have that edge over them. But yeah, and then obviously the top of the division goes to the Packers. Like, I don't even think that's close. And the Vikings really didn't make any moves this offseason other than their coach, and they kind of been average. Like, I could see them going around 500 or a game or under or over 500 and being second place in that division.
Well, Dame just kind of went without us, jerk. He just kind
Yeah.
of brushed through all the teams. Jeez, bro, I thought we were going one at a time.
Dame said, "I want to just get to the AFC North
God,
and move
all
this
right.
along."
No. I just thought I would segue into it, and you guys know.
I mean, all right. Well, all right, let's get to the... Okay, so
I mean, that was a good segue, to be fair to him.
he named all of them. What segue? We can't
I
segue
mean,
anywhere.
we talked about the Lions and the Bears.
And then you said the Packers.
Yeah.
Screw it. Let's go in depth right now. All right. Let's talk about the Lions. Because
There's not much to talk about at the top. That's what I'm saying.
So I am very bullish on the Lions, actually. I know, it's comical, but look, Dame talked about most of the moves. So they signed DJ Chark, actually, in free agency. They drafted, these are the notable moves, by the way, drafted Aiden Hutchinson, and Jameson Williams. I think Jameson Williams will be out for a while before he actually plays, right?
Yeah, he's still recovering from his torn ACL late in the college season. I think like the best case scenario, I think he returns like 7-8 games left in the season.
Yeah. So like I remember reading that maybe December was like the aiming target date, but who knows? There's literally no rush, especially for like kind of a rebuilding team-ish. But like Dame said, they have a lot of decent weapons. So they have DeAndre Swift, you have TJ Hawkinson, they have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who was like a revelation for them last year. They were a good, bad team last year, as weird as that sounds.
They lost a lot of close games.
A lot of close games, and, you know, I don't know, will he be back this year, Jeff Okudah?
He should be, yeah. He got injured pretty early last season, I thought.
Okay,
He's
so
been a little bit of a bust, though, but obviously there's still potential there.
well, yeah. I mean, look, he has time. Again, like we talked about, like the Lions, like you could take your time. But I think I really like this roster. Like Dame said, Jared Goff isn't like a great QB, but like I think he's decent enough. He's a stopgap QB for them. You know, you have everything ready, but the thing is, the issue is, are they going to be bad enough to draft like a new QB? I actually think the roster's decent. I don't think the Lions are going to be that bad. They're certainly going to be better. They're certainly going to be better than the Bears. I know that for sure. But I think, Jared Goff has some weapons to work with here, and they love Dan Campbell. I know they love their coach. So I think the ingredients are there for this team to not make noise. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But I do think, maybe 6-7. I don't know. Maybe 7's pushing it, but like 6-win team, not too far fetched, man. I think Goff with these weapons,
That's accurate, yeah.
They could make some noise. Yeah, Jerk, do you have any comments on the Lions?
No, I think you guys said it. I think like Dan Campbell is really proof that you need the right coach to lead the right team, and I think he's the perfect coach for this locker room. He's that high energy guy that I think this environment needs to be able to push them. I will just say a note on Jeff Okudah, like he's just 23 years old. Like the kid, I know rookie season was tough for him, just him being forced to be that number one corner. And again, like I think this is a big deal. It ended up being a lame duck coaching staff, and especially who's the coach before Campbell? Matt Patricia.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna hold anything against anyone that had to deal with Matt Patricia for any goddamn period of time as head coach. Like, so I'm not gonna do that to Jeff Okuda. I don't think that's fair. No, but like you guys said, like this is just a team that's collected a number of young assets, and they're gonna keep on getting better. Like you said, Chris, maybe they're not gonna be like the top 3-5 pick that a lot of people are projecting. I think certain teams, including one in their own division, is gonna beat them to it. But next year's quarterback class still projects to be pretty well. Like a lot of people are expecting Spencer Rattler to bounce back and be a first round pick again. I think Will Levis, like next year, projects to be a 4-5 quarterback draft class in the first round potentially. Like we could end up seeing, like the Lions could get the 10th pick and they could still get the quarterback that they want because maybe they just target one of the lower named guys, you know. So I think the pieces are in place for Detroit to eventually be really good in this division, especially because like we are on the final years of Aaron Rodgers when he officially retires. Who the heck knows? But like Detroit, I said this about the Lions last season. Build for being really good in 3 to 5 years.
And they are.
I know exactly. That's what they're doing. So all the props in the world to Detroit. They're doing this the right way right now, which a lot of teams like they're not making. When Detroit makes moves, they make smart moves. 1-year deal to DJ Chark, trading up to draft a Jameson Williams. They're making smart moves. They're not wasting their time, and they're not giving out the big contracts that they were in the most recent regime. I keep forgetting his name, but the guy from the Patriots that they gave that like 5-year deal to. They're not making the bad moves like that. They are making intelligent moves. I think Detroit is they're crushing their rebuild right now.
Yeah. Again, I'm bullish on them. I really am. Yeah, like you said, Jerk. I think it was really well said. Like they're in place to kind of take over that division post Aaron Rodgers. Who knows when that will be? But you know, it's a bold statement, but I don't think it's too far fetched. All right. And then let's talk about the Minnesota Vikings. Now, guys, this is kind of a little spoiler alert on my end. A dark horse wild card playoff team in my eyes. What would you say, Dame?
Oh boy.
So a dark horse wild card team. Now, I think this team is actually decent. So they made a new coaching hire. Yeah, so they replaced him with Kevin O'Connell. Kevin O'Connell comes from the Sean McVay tree. So immediately offensive-minded coach. I think he will be great for Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson. But I think they had a pretty good draft. We were talking about it off mic. They drafted Lewis Sign or Lewis. What is it, Jerg? What are the possibilities?
It's Sign or Scene.
Okay, yeah. But yeah, they draft him. They also safety, of course, and then they draft Andrew Booth, cornerback. So they make some additions to their defense as well. But I think the Vikings roster is actually pretty good on paper. You know, so they had a decent draft. You have Kirk Cousins is hit or miss, but I think Kirk Cousins is a decent quarterback, you know. You have Justin Jefferson, who is just just one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. You have your Dalvin Cook, you have your Adam Thielens. They have a decent roster on paper, you know. So maybe Irv Smith Jr. will be healthy again. It's kind of a low-key player on their end, but I think they do have the ingredients, especially in this kind of. It's not. Is it a weak division? Would you guys consider this a weak division? I do think the. Okay, so I do think like the Vikings have enough ingredients to kind of make noise here, especially because their division is kind of meh. You know, I think the only team they have to worry about is the Packers. And guess what? I think the Packers got worse this year for obvious reasons. They're still a good team, but they did get worse. So I think the Vikings are there to make somewhat noise. It's kind of a wait and see approach, but I do think they have the offensive talent. I do think they got a little bit of depth on the defensive end, primarily through the draft. I think Kevin O'Connell is going to be a breath of fresh air for Kirk Cousins to kind of unlock his, you know, I don't know. I don't want to say potential because it is Kirk Cousins at the end of the day, but it's going to unlock a lot more potential for Justin Jefferson, who's already on the come up. So that's why I think they're a dark horse wildcard team, especially in like a kind of, I would say, a depleted NFC a little bit. You know, it's kind of a little bit open besides like the top 3 teams. And we'll talk about that. But yeah, that's what I got to say about it. Jerg, let me start with you on this one. What do we think about the Vikings?
No, yeah, they've been a perennial wild card contender, I think, for a while now. And I always said I think it was time for Mike Zimmer to be out of here. I just don't think he messed with that team anymore. Especially, and Dame has made bones about it on this podcast before, but the decision to, not play Justin Jefferson anymore when he was just a couple yards away from breaking the Vikings single season record for receiving yards in a year. I think that Zimmer didn't fit with this team anymore, didn't fit with the culture, and as well as the new general manager hire as well. It was a complete regime change for this Minnesota Vikings squad. And I think it's what they need at the end of the day. His name is escaping me at the moment, but their previous GM now, like a lot of people were like, oh, why did they let him go? He's so good, da da da. Like, I'm gonna be real with you. Like, aside from a couple draft picks he hit on here and there that I think freaking 9 out of 10 people could have hit on, what did this dude do to make the Minnesota Vikings a true playoff contender every single season? Like, when people are like, oh, but he drafted Justin Jefferson, and he drafted Dalvin Cook, and he drafted so and so. Okay, the same general manager had the 3 first-round picks a while back, and he had Matt Khalil, Laquan Treadwell, and I think it's like a cornerback name that I'm just like, it's escaping me at the moment. Like, the Minnesota Vikings, I think that regime's tenure, we saw the best out of them. It was that lone NFC Championship game appearance when they got absolutely slaughtered by Big Richard Nick Foles and the Philadelphia Eagles. I think the Vikings needed that new blood in there on both levels, and they got it. I think O'Connell it'll be interesting. How much better can that offense technically be? Who knows? Like, we already know Adam Thielen's pretty good, and Justin Jefferson is the bona fide number one stud receiver on that team, and we know Kirk Cousins can just put up numbers. Now, how legit are those numbers? How are they empty calories against like all the bad teams? Because we know death taxes and Kirk Cousins just cannot beat a winning team to save his life. But at the same time, you know, these Sean McVay guys can get some pretty good offensive performances out of guys, i.e. Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow this past season with Zach Taylor. So I'm going to be interested to see what the offense can do. But the defense, man, I'm just not sure about. I know they had a couple of additions, but that defense, it's the guys on that team defensively are either too young or too old. And that is not the best combo in the world. Save for a couple pieces, I think Harrison Smith is going to defy age. But one bad injury will probably be the end of his time as a great safety. And I think Danielle Hunter is really good, but everyone else on that team, and I think one of their linebackers is pretty good as well. So 3 of your 11 defensive starters, I'm cool. If the other 8 are either too old or too young, and I don't have confidence in. If I have to question 8 of your 11 defensive starters, no bueno. So are they going to be a playoff contender? Yes, because I think the NFC overall is very wide open compared to what the AFC is. Because there's a division or two in the AFC. But the Vikings have a chance, but I don't think that, like, I got to see how this new team plays, like, because this is a new Minnesota Vikings team compared to what we've seen in the previous years.
Yeah, I mean, I already kind of went into the Vikings, but like I said, I think they're such an average team. Just Kirk Cousins is such an average quarterback. I think they have a pretty great offense based on their weapons, from Dalvin Cook to Justin Jefferson to Adam Thielen. But just at the end of the day, it comes down to Kirk Cousins. He's just average, and then obviously, like Jerg mentioned, their defense just isn't good at all. Can't even name most of the defensive players either. So that just shows me that I know that defense isn't going to be good, and this offense isn't elite enough. It's not led by an elite enough level quarterback where he can overcome such a bad defense. So that's how I think they're going to be pretty average. But I do think they'll be better than the Bears and Lions, though.
Yeah, not a high bar to surpass, but still a bar. Okay, final team in the NFC North, Green Bay Packers, fellas. How do we discuss it with the Packers? Like, we know they're going to be a good team. Aaron Rodgers, I think, re-signed for generational wealth this offseason. They lost Devontae Adams, which is a massive L. They did draft a favorite of mine and Dame's, which is Christian Watson, which, I mean, what was he, second round?
Include me in that too, sir.
Okay,
How dare you?
all right, Jerk. I didn't know. My bad. But yeah, Christian Watson, which is honestly long term, I think has the potential to be like a wide receiver 1 for them. I think he's that good. I think he has a decent, like a high ceiling. David Bakhtiari, I believe he's hurt. I think he had a knee procedure. I think the news dropped yesterday or a few days ago, but he's hurt. No timetable in his return. Did they lose someone? Did they lose an offensive lineman? Any key additions or else?
I think they did cut someone from last year's offensive line, but the name is escaping me.
Yeah, I mean,
was it Billy Turner?
It might have been. I think they lost him. I know the year before they lost their starting center. So year by year, they're just losing more and more.
Yeah, and I think with the Bakhtiari injury, it kind of like fucks them a lot on the this season.
He's having complications from his ACL injury because he tore his ACL last year.
So here's the thing: the Packers, I think they're good. They're going to be the best team of this division, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like, the discussion for the Packers shouldn't be winning the division. It's just like, can they compete for a championship? Last year ended very disappointingly when they lost to the 49ers. What an embarrassing performance. But yeah, I mean, like, I think, again, we talked about it. The NFC is kind of wide open now, and I think the Packers are still good enough to be at the top. But what's the ceiling for them? You know? And what they signed Sammy Watkins? Like, it's kind of, it's a weird situation for them because they're still the best team in their division, but they got worse, so do I feel bad? Not at all. I mean, Aaron Rodgers will still do his thing. He'll propel that organization and that team to a winning record, of course. But it's kind of weird because I don't think they're going to be. I don't think they're a title contender this year. Might be a bold take, but I don't think they're a title contender. So, Dame, let me start with you. What do you make of the Packers this offseason? Like, obviously, they had some key losses in Devontae Adams, which is a massive loss. But yeah, what do you make of their ceiling this season?
Well, their offseason to me was just very confusing. You obviously signed Aaron Rodgers' massive extension, and then you take away the best receiver in the league from him, who he's had obviously great chemistry with. Um, so that didn't make sense to me, and not drafting wide receiver in the first round didn't make sense to me. I get the trading out for Christian Watson; that was a good move. Props to them, but they could have just taken a wide receiver. They had 2 first-round picks, and they won defense on both sides, both times instead of drafting wide receiver one of them. Could have had Traylon Burks, who's I think is better than Christian Watson, but it is what it is. They obviously lost Darius Smith on the defensive side of the ball as well, who was their best pass rusher last year. I forgot where he went to. It might have been the Ravens. I know like I said, they drafted 2 defensive guys, but they're not going to be Darius Smith right away. They're going to be young guys that need time to really develop and stuff. And the Packers don't have much time with Aaron Rodgers. He's has another 2 years maybe of elite play, and then you really got to rebuild. And so, in my opinion, they should have went all in this offseason and trying to maximize the last couple of years of Aaron Rodgers' career. But clearly, they went the opposite way by trading away Devontae Adams and drafting, developing young guys on defense instead of adding more weapons to Rodgers.
So,
Jerk.
I know I too this entire podcast has critiqued what the Green Bay Packers have done in off seasons and drafts past, but I actually give them a pass for this past draft because I think they added to the defense in the right positions, and at the end of the day, I think Christian Watson and also Romeo Dobbs, who I became a big fan of late in the draft process personally. Finished off his career with a couple of 1,000-yard receiving seasons at Nevada. I think I know they didn't use a first round pick on a receiver, but to be honest, I think the Packers did pretty good for themselves in terms of the
Mm.
kids that they got. And I also think they made the necessary additions they needed along the defense with those 2 firsts. It's not like they drafted another backup quarterback or a backup long snapper or some stupid thing like that. They got another linebacker to pair alongside Devondre Campbell, who, like, they did resign, but that was also just one season for him so far. Can he repeat it? And then they took a Wyatt, I think, from Georgia, was their other first round pick, and he very much needed in that interior of the defense, which, like, opponents' rushing attacks have been the weakness of this Green Bay Packers team for years now. Especially, I mean, we talk about last year's 49ers game, the one from a couple years before that when the Niners made the Super Bowl. Jimmy G threw the football 8 times, and the 49ers won that game handily. So I think the Packers made the necessary adjustments they needed to. Zadarius Smith actually, Dame, it's funny you mentioned. So he did sign with the Ravens, but then he reneged on that offer and then signed with the Vikings.
All
So
right.
Zadarius Smith is actually in the division. So that'll be interesting when they play. But yeah, no, I think the Green Bay Packers, I think the defense should perform again this season because they have pieces back, and Jair Alexander is hopefully healthy for the whole year. They have a very good safety tandem, I think, in Darnell Savage and Adrian Amos. The linebacking core got a little bit better. The defensive line, they're hoping for a big year out of Rashawn Gary. He could follow up what ended up being a pretty good performance last season. So I think the defense is fine. I think the number one thing for this team, and I think it's what they should go after near the NFL trade deadline, asking the Packers to make a trade at the trade deadline
Uh-huh.
is sacrilege. But at the same time, I think they need to trade for an offensive lineman if one becomes available. Because, like you guys said, David Bakhtiari just setbacks for 2 seasons now because of his torn ACL way back, and that's a guy that they paid a lot of money to. They need to get a left tackle in there. They need to find a way to get more offensive protection. I think the interior of that line is actually really good. They still have Jenkins. They have the kid last year who was a rookie, Myers. I think he was good. There's one more kid on that offensive line that is just like his name is just escaping me at the moment. But I think the Packers, for the most part, are good. on the interior. It's the rest of the offensive line to me. It's the two tackle spots, sadly enough, that have questions, and I think that's what the Packers really need to focus on. Finding a way to improve this team any which way that they can. So I think, like you said, Chris, at the end of the day, I'm not going to say that I don't think they could be a contender because Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers, and you know that man, the back-to-back now defending MVP, I'm always going to give his team a chance. But at the same time, like there are weaknesses here. I think you can definitively say the Rams are better than them. I think a lot of people would probably give the 49ers the edge if they faced again. I mean, granted, we don't know about Trey Lance. Packers, like they might be the third team in this conference, but
Bucks.
it's and some people would put the Bucks. So it's a lot of question marks for a team that like their Super Bowl window is slowly coming to a close here before we know him, we love him, but Jordan Love eventually has to take the reins for this team. And
Oh God.
Packers fans had Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. You guys didn't do enough, so you get stuck with Jordan Love as to atone for your sins.
Nice, sure. Good finish on that one. Yeah, I don't feel bad. And again, you lose Devontae Adams, which is, I mean, that's why I think like they should have really went hard on Julio Jones. But I mean, again, it's not, it was his decision at the end of the day. But I really think like Julio Jones is kind of like a must get for them, in my opinion,
Right.
because they needed like a wide receiver one.
Well, at the end of the day, Chris, like, and this is the thing, and this is why I think for what they did in the draft was fine, because I don't think they were ever going to trade up. This is a very conservative front office of the Packers, and it's been
for better or for worse.
Yeah, and it's been this way ever since Ted Thompson was there. And I like, look, all due respect, R.I.P. Ted Thompson, but like, freaking, this is how this team has always been. And Brian Gutekunst is the exact same way. Like, this team is not going to go out there. Like, even a couple years ago when Will Fuller was up for trade to Green Bay, they said no to it. Like, this team will, like, let's just call it as it is. They're not going to make that extra move sometimes, even though it probably could benefit them in the short term. And like they're not willing to do what the Rams have clearly done, which is say F them draft picks and try to go win the Super Bowl. So, and I know not everyone can get lucky with that way of going about things, but just try a move for God's sakes. Like something at this point to help out the offensive line would be better than what they're doing right now, which is nothing.
I'm not again. I don't feel bad. Well, they have work to do. They have work to do. They're still a good team, but they have work to do. All right, let's move on over to the AFC North, which is a lot more interesting. By the way, guys, there's a new betting favorite to land Jimmy G. Do you guys want to know who it is?
Is it an AFC North team?
No, it's an NFC team.
Giants.
Yeah, plus 200.
Yeah. Oh wow.
It's the Giants at plus 200, the Browns at plus 225, Seahawks at plus 350, Texans plus 500, Lions plus 600. That's the order. I could see him going to the Giants. It would be so hilarious to watch him go to the Giants because me and Dame know a lot of, so does Jurg. We know a lot of Giants fans, and they'd probably rip their skin off. But yeah, just wanted to bring that up. All right. What happened, Jurg? You want to say something?
I was just gonna say I'll take Jimmy G over Daniel Jones. Like
yeah. You're not
now.
Yeah. Again, not a high bar to clear, but still a bar. All right, AFC North, fellas, relatively competitive division, I would say, off rip. Let's start off with, because I really do think this is a competitive division when everyone's healthy, but training camp just started, so who knows? There's still moves to be made. There's still Watson to be figured out. We don't know.
The Steelers.
Yeah, I was gonna start with the Steelers. All right, Steelers. Okay. Their quarterback situation's kind of weird because they signed Mitch Trubisky. They drafted Kenny Pickett. I think we're all in agreement. We do think Kenny Pickett should start. Right? Are we in agreement for that?
No.
No?
No.
You guys don't want to throw him straight into the fire? Is that not a Mike Tomlin move? So you're going to start with Mitch Trubisky?
I think Mitch Trubisky is better than Kenny Pickett.
Really?
I never was a big fan of Kenny Pickett coming out of college. Do I think eventually maybe he'll start towards the end of the season? Yes.
Yeah.
But to start the season, I definitely think Mitch Trubisky should be the guy. Obviously, Mitch Trubisky is not great, but I think with the right pieces around him and the right coaching and the right defense like the Steelers do have, I think he'll be okay. And then as they go on to the season, they see they really don't have a real contender in the entire team. I think that's when they'll kind of shift to Kenny Pickett to see what he has. But to definitely start the season, I think Mr. Trubisky got to be that guy. They signed him really early in the offseason before they even drafted Kenny Pickett. So he probably has more of a feel for the offense as well. So I definitely think Mr. Trubisky should be the guy to start.
Okay. Jared, you wanna comment on that?
I mean, I'm kind of the same mindset that I think Kenny Pickett should start on the bench and a learn a little bit, but b also see like just what it's like. I think we have, because of certain guys like Joe Burrow, even though he ended up getting hurt his rookie season, but Burrow and Herbert, I think they've really changed the math on what the expectations for quarterbacks are. Um, and I think last year's quarterback class kind of was suffered as a result because Lawrence didn't do great, Justin Fields didn't do great, like guys didn't do great. I think the old way was you take the first round rookie and you sit him. Aaron Rodgers sat for 2.5, 3 seasons before he finally started. Like, this is the way. I'm not saying that's going to be the case with Kenny Pickett for that long, but I think the way to bring him along is let Trubisky, throw Trubisky to the fire first and see if he can do anything. And try to see if Mitch Trubisky wasn't that great or if Matt Nagy wasn't that good of a coach. Spoiler alert, it can be both, ladies and gentlemen, and it probably is both in this case. But I think that's the way to go. You have Mason Rudolph there if you still want to.
Oh God.
No, this is the thing. If Trubisky plays bad, but you still want to wait on Kenny Pickett, throw Mason Rudolph out there for a week or two. Maybe in one of the Browns games, Myles Garrett will sack him and tear his helmet off again, and don't hit him with it. And then you can finally be
Maybe do hit him with it.
But then you know what? Kenny Pickett can finally take the reins. And it sucks for me to say that because at the end of the day, I love Kenny Pickett. He has, he's got the style down for me. He wore like a fishing/bucket hat a day or two ago, and he wears the gloves. So on an appearance basis, I want Kenny Pickett to succeed right away. But I don't think that'll be the case. I think, like, I'm sure you were alluding to this, Chris, but I think just overall the Steelers, this is going to be a tough season for them. Even though the defense is talented, I just think offensively, it's not enough there to they're not going to be a surprise playoff team again this season. If they are, just put Mike Tomlin in the Hall of Fame because this team should not make the playoffs.
Well, here's the thing. I think the Steelers are in a weird situation because I don't think they're not going to be bad, obviously, and I think whoever starts at QB, I trust Mike Tomlin to make the right decision, right? So I think what is holding them back is their quarterback situation because, like you said, Jurg, they're very talented defensively. I'm looking at their offense, like Najee Harris, second year. I think he will be. I think Najee Harris has like the tools to be one of the best running backs in the NFL, right? So you have like your star running back. They lose Juju, right? In free agency, he goes to the Chiefs. They have Chase Claypool and I think Deontay Johnson. Was that kind of like a coming out party for him last year? Because I do think he was decent last year, right?
Yeah, like Deontay Johnson is continuing the legacy of just late round Steelers wide receivers that they could turn to be pretty good players,
right?
And that's the case this season. He's expected to be the number one.
Right. So and then they drafted George Pickens, which I think was a solid get for them. So I do think I don't like Chase Claypool. I think and also like I don't think he's that great, but he is decent. He's a decent wide receiver, right?
Well, he's a top 3 receiver.
According to him, just drugs, but. I think their wide receiver depth isn't that bad, right? When you look at Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, and Chase Claypool. So you have that wide receiver core. You have Najee Harris, great defense. It's just that their quarterback situation is kind of holding them back. And like Steelers aren't going to make it out of this division. But I don't think they're going to be bad. I don't know, because it's Mike Tomlin, it's hard for me to be like, well, the Steelers aren't going to make it out of the division. Because, like, what if I didn't think they would make the playoffs last year, and look what they did.
Yeah.
And, like, I think they kind of did. Are they better than last season, if you think about it?
I mean, they don't have a corpse of a quarterback behind center anymore, which I guess is technically a good thing. But I don't know. It's like, for some people, the whole presence of Ben Roethlisberger thing means a lot to them. And just, like... for me personally, I don't care. I'm happy that scumbag is no longer in the NFL.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I get what people are trying to say that you miss. Like, his presence means something in the locker room, and I think without that there, they'll struggle. Like again, but I agree with you, Chris. Because at the end of the day, Mike Tomlin doesn't die. Like,
yeah, he'll make something out of nothing. That's why I can't. I get why people would kind of write off the Steelers, but I can't fully do that. That's just me, though. That's just me.
I mean, I've done it before. I'll do it again. I
Yeah,
will
I'm doing it
confidently,
again. Running it back.
I'll confidently say they're not making the playoffs.
Oh
But
yeah, especially in this division. But I just think like it it has to happen for me to believe it, just because, and it's out of pure respect for Mike Tomlin. I think we're all in agreement for that. But yeah, let's move on over to the Browns. Okay, so the Browns are kind of tricky because the Deshaun Watson case I think is still going on. They still have yet to make a decision on how many games he'll be suspended for, and I think the timetable of his suspension will kind of dictate what kind of season the Browns will have. Um, we talked about their quarterback depth. Jacoby Brissett is out there waiting in the shadows. Big Jacoby Brissett podcast here. But yeah, I think Browns have a really good defense. I think also you have your Nick Chubb as well, Kareem Hunt. I think they're weak position, and they did sign Amari Cooper, but their wide receiver depth is a little I'm a little bearish on it. Besides Amari Cooper, who I still need to see him healthy for a consistent amount of time. So yeah, this is difficult because I do also think, because I've seen a lot of like betting sites put the Browns as like a top 10 team in the NFL if Watson's playing the whole season, which is not going to happen. But with Watson playing, they have like the Browns as like an elite team. I don't necessarily see that. I mean, am I wrong to think that maybe people are kind of overrating the Browns if Watson does play for a decent amount of games?
no, I think no, Chris, I'm with you, and I don't get it either. Why people are just assuming if Deshaun Watson starts from week one that they're like this will be like one of the top teams in the league. Like, will they be a playoff contender? Of course, but like I'll take every team in the AFC West over them right now. I'll take the Buffalo Bills over them right now. So you already have 5 within that conference. Are like the Bengals and the Ravens. Like I don't get the hype behind Cleveland. Just assuming that if Deshaun was there, everything would be fine. Um, yeah, like you said, the wide receiving core is very iffy. I think even the defense, like there are elite players on that defense. Can they put it together this season to be an elite defenses? To me, is the question. I think Myles Garrett's great. I think, of course, Ward is one of the top young corners in the game. Not even just young; he's just one of the top corners in the game now. And they have a couple other great pieces. I love Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah so much. But I like a lot has to happen for Cleveland. And like you said, the biggest thing at the end of the day is to see how many games old Grabby Hands is going to end up playing this season, because that'll be a big factor into how the Browns season overall goes. But I mean, like you said, Chris, there's Jacoby Brissett, Josh Rosen, and Joshua Dobbs are waiting in the
Oh,
wings.
right. They signed Josh Rosen. I forgot about that.
So we'll see there. Maybe this is finally Josh Rosen's time to make those 10 teams that didn't draft him or 9 teams that didn't draft him pay for it. But probably not.
Oh, and by the way, so like, and if Watson doesn't play, then this is kind of a clipped year for the Browns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're probably the worst team in the division if Watson doesn't play. Are we in agreement for that?
Yeah. So I'd probably have the Browns without Watson as the worst team in the division
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not a Brissett guy or
Oh
any other
wow. All
quarterback
right, Dane.
on that roster guy because he kind of sucks. But I'm not complaining because the Browns played the Jets week 2.
Yep.
But if Deshaun Watson does play the year, like say he only gets to spend 2 games, 4 games, something like that, I think the Browns would be probably, in my opinion, the second best team in the division. I'll get to the best team when we get to that team, but I think they'd be the second best team in the division because I think Deshaun Watson's the top 7 quarterback in the NFL when he's healthy and he's playing. And obviously, you have the best running back duo in the league in Chubb and Kareem Hunt. You still have a great offensive line. Yeah, the wide receiver group needs help. Obviously, losing Jarvis Landry sucks, but you added Amari Cooper, and I think hopefully he's going to stay healthy. You still have David Njoku. Still have another couple young guys on the outside. I forgot the guy's name that he kind of shows out sometimes. He catches a lot of deep balls.
Higgins?
No, no, someone else. Peoples Jones. Peoples
Oh,
Jones.
All right. Isn't Higgins on the Bengals?
Yeah, no, there's another Higgins on the Browns,
Oh.
but Peoples Jones I really like. I think he's a really good deep threat to have, and Deshaun Watson likes to throw that deep ball as well. And I think I don't know if I mentioned this here or just in one of my boys' group chats. Will Fuller is a free agent, and Will Fuller and Deshaun Watson had a lot of good chemistry when they were both in Houston. They connected on a lot of deep balls and stuff, so I wouldn't be surprised if once the Deshaun Watson stuff gets figured out, um, they go out and get Will Fuller on this roster. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. And as for the defense, I really like their defense. I think they have one of the best defensive lines in the league. think they have a great secondary and pretty good linebackers. And obviously, as long as your defense is Myles Garrett, they're always going to put pressure on the quarterback. So overall, I think this team, as long as Deshaun Watson is at the helm, I think is going to be the second best team in this division.
Yeah, and I know Myles Garrett is going to look at Baker Mayfield like food in that first game against the Panthers. Yeah, yeah, I think it really depends on if like how many games Watson plays. If he's out for the season, then I think the Browns are the worst team, and they don't have their draft pick, so huge L. And if he does play, like Dame, like I'm just the consensus here is that I think people really are overrating them if he does play. I don't see it. I think they're gonna be a good team, but not like crazy great to the heights where everyone's kind of being like, well, they're a top 10 team in the NFL. Don't see it. But yeah, let's move on over to, I guess I want to talk about the Bengals right now because just made the Super Bowl. However, and maybe I have a feeling Dame's gonna agree with me, and maybe even Jerry actually. I do think a lot of people are kind of overrating the Bengals now.
Yep.
Just a tad bit, just a tad bit. Oh, look, we all love Joe Burrow, we all love Joe Shiesty, Jamar Chase, all around wide receiver, one of the best in the NFL. You have your Joe Mixons, you have your T Higgins, you have your Tyler Boyds. They have their offense. I think is really good. I believe they lost CJ Uzoma to the Jets. But I think to replace him, they signed Hayden Hurst from the Falcons name.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so they replaced him at tight end. Now, I do think they beefed up their offensive line, which thank God. They signed Alex Kappa, right? So, improvements to their weaknesses, right? Wow, I think a lot of people have the Bengals as a top tier team in the AFC. And you know what? They could be. They very well could be. But man, I don't know. I don't even think they're going to top their division. I don't think they're going to be at the top of their division, which leads me to the Ravens. Well, let's just stick to the Bengals. Dame, I heard you agree.
Yeah.
You think the Bengals are getting overrated now, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I wasn't a big fan of them last year. I think they kind of had a lot of things go their way.
Fluke.
Yeah, a lot of flukes, a lot of this and that. It took a Patrick Mahomes' absolute meltdown in the second half of the AFC Championship for them to even make the Super Bowl because they were getting absolutely destroyed in the first half. But overall, their season, I'm not saying they were a bad team. They made it, they deserved it. Props to them. But I'm not too confident in them repeating the success they had last year because although they did improve their offensive line, it's still a work in progress. And as long as that offensive line is a work in progress, you always have the threat of Joe Burrow getting hurt. I was never a
Yes.
fan of their defense, of course, and I think a lot of the times on their offense they got a lot of big plays off just stupid defensive mistakes instead of them really just being that exploding offense. Jamar Chase had a lot of 70, 60-yard touchdowns that were just defensive meltdowns, and if you're not getting that, it's gonna be harder to move the ball and really score points in a hurry. So we'll see. We'll see how they are this year. I'm not too confident that they'll make the playoffs. I haven't made my final decision on that. I think they're kind of on the bubble, but we'll see how it goes. But I do think they slightly improved on the offensive line. I think that's going to help. But like I said, I think a lot of things went their way last year that I don't think will go their way again this year.
Especially if the Ravens are healthy.
Oh yeah,
Let's
that's the team I have as my best team of the division.
Yeah. Jerg, Bengals thoughts?
No, for me, honestly, they're my pick to win the division. I I think I know a lot of people are we're falling into the thing that because they were the surprise team and now people want to bury them and they're like, oh, we're overhyping the Bengals did make some moves this offseason to actually really improve their team. I think Alex Kappa and Lyle Collins were two outstanding pickups to improve that offensive line heavily. And Ted Karras is just there to be a decent veteran, maybe the sixth offensive lineman. But I think they really made strides to improve the offensive line to protect Joe Burrow and to make sure, as we've said multiple times on this podcast, make sure he keeps his head on his goddamn shoulders. You didn't really need to do too much to the offense, honestly. You lost CJ Uzoma, but you got
Right.
Hayden
Yeah.
Hurts. That's essentially the same player. Right there, you didn't need to do anything to the wide receiver core because you have Tyler Boyd, you have Jamar Chase, and you have T Higgins. That's an amazing 1-2-3 right there. You have Giovanni Bernard still and a decent group of running backs behind him, including I think an underrated power back in Samaje Perine. And then I think the defense, I definitely get the point, but Trey Hendrickson proved that he was worth the contract last season that they had given him, and I think he's still going to be a pretty good pass rusher for this team. I think the interior of the defensive line still needs to improve, but I think Reader and BJ Hill are a fine duo for the most part. Especially BJ Hill, like he came a lot. He had a couple plays here and there in the playoffs, especially in the AFC Championship game against the Kansas City Chiefs. And like the defensive back crew is probably the main portion of this team that I think they could have stand to improve on. But I think at the end of the day, and I will say like the Dax Hill pickup I think was a big one for me personally because I was such a massive Dax Hill fan. And also Cam Taylor-Britt was a solid pickup as well for this team in this past draft, drafting from Nebraska. So while I don't think the secondary could have definitely been worked on more, I personally, again, I'm really thinking a lot of teams are going to try to be aggressive this year. I think the Bengals could be a team that could maybe make a move at the deadline for someone in that secondary, particularly the quarterback room, to really help them out. To me, like if Joe Burrow's healthy, and I don't think it's as big of an if as people think because he literally just went through a full season. Like I think the Bengals should be the favorites to repeat in this to win this division again. Like, will they make the Super Bowl again? Probably not. But I like to think that they'll just be a flash in the pan. I think is you're not giving a lot of faith to Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. I think that's quite the amazing duo that they have there in Cincinnati. They have some good building blocks there.
They do. They do. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if they top the division. I just don't think it's like a surefire thing as like I'm seeing from like a lot of like people's predictions. But well, that leads us to the Ravens, which I think is probably like the Bengals is number one competition to top to basically top the division. The Ravens. So I don't want to talk about the Lamar Jackson contract stuff, even though I do think that could be a lingering thing that could possibly affect the team. But I do think Lamar Jackson's still going to do his thing. But they lose Hollywood Brown. So they lose, I guess, their wide receiver one. Well, it's certainly Lamar Jackson's number one target. I think they had a phenomenal draft. They drafted Kyle Hamilton. They drafted David Ojabo, and Tyler Linderbaum. So them boys drafted. They had an A+ draft. I think them and the Jets had A+ draft. I had to bring that up, but I think they drafted phenomenally. Their secondary is elite. They signed Marcus Williams. J.K. Dobbins, I think, will return. I don't know necessarily. I don't necessarily know when. Look, the Ravens got hit with the injury bug last year, and I do think that was a big reason as to why they didn't make the playoffs. Healthy, and now with the improvements they made, especially from the draft, I think this is their division for the taking. I really do think it depends on the health. I do think their wide receiver depth is very suspect. I think a lot of this kind of relies on Rashad Bateman. I think all of us were high on Rashad Bateman coming out of the draft last year. So he's going to need to take the reins to become wide receiver one and develop that chemistry with Lamar Jackson. But, yeah, look, I mean, if J.K. Dobbins comes back and he is effective, no pressure, of course. We don't want him to, rush or anything. But I do think this is for the Ravens taking. It's between them and the Bengals in terms of who's going to be the best team in that division. But it's because I think the if card, if healthy, kind of applies to every team in the NFL. But I do think when they're right, Ravens are one of the best teams in football. So, Jerk, let me start off with you on this one. What's your take on the Ravens ceiling this season?
Oh yeah, personally, right now I have them as my second team in the division, and it's going to be interesting at the end of the day for me to see if they can overtake the Bengals. And I think they definitely can. I think Lamar Jackson being healthy, I think that running back crew, like you say yourself, but it looked like a Mongol horde it went through a village with what that running back room was after the preseason. Like everyone and their mother was injured last year. It was bad, man. And I think that's going to make a big difference this year. Their health, Mark Andrews being tight end number one. You mentioned some of the rookies they drafted, Chris. Like just guys that people like. I don't think they'll be big names, but Daniel Falele, Travis Jones, and Jalen Armour Davis. I think were three phenomenal depth pickups for this team in the draft. I think the Ravens had arguably the best all-around draft when you consider their depth picks as well. So I think it's there for Baltimore, but just Rashad Bateman. I know Mark Andrews is there, but Rashad Bateman is now technically the number one wide receiver, and I love Lamar Jackson. I know he's so dynamic. I definitely believe in him, but I think we might finally see a couple games here where it's really costing Baltimore not being more aggressive and getting a real number one for Lamar Jackson to throw to. And I think even with the defense, I know the defense has some talent, but I think it was a big loss that they weren't able to keep Zadarius Smith in the fold. And with Wink Martindale leaving this team, I think the talent is there to pick things up for them, but I think there's very much a chance that the defense will have a couple gaps here and there. And so that's my main concern with this team. I think I think we're finally gonna see them like you reap what you sow, and you don't do enough to help out your quarterback, you're going to suffer for it. And I think you might see that in a couple like possessions here that'll end up costing them maybe a game or two, and maybe including a game against the Cincinnati Bengals. To memory, I think their second game against the Bengals is the final game of the season, if I'm not wrong. So like the AFC North could be on the line in that final week of the season, and I think that'd be a big deal. So if you're Baltimore, like, yes, are you the number one threat in this division to potentially beat the Bengals? And should you also be a favorite to many? Of course. I don't blame it at all. I think it's kind of a coin flip between these two teams. I think they'll only be separated by a game, and it might just be that final game that they play. But I think I just don't like the flaws on this team compared to
Right.
the flaws on this team bother me more than the flaws on the Bengals.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas the Bengals attacked offensive line in the offseason, the Ravens did not help out their receiving unit, and they also traded away a name on that receiving unit. So it's just like it just doesn't sit right with me.
Dame.
Yeah, the reason I have the Ravens as the best team is because of how loaded they are. I think at every level, other than maybe wide receiver. I don't understand the Marquise Brown trade. That didn't really make sense to me, but still having Rashad Bateman and Mark Andrews, I think with the kind of scheme they have where it's so run heavy, I think that should be enough as long as they do their job. And Lamar, the one thing though that is going to be big looking forward and something that maybe make the Ravens underachieve is Lamar Jackson's contract situation. That's something to really watch out for. Kyler Murray, I believe, was drafted the year after Lamar Jackson, and he got a contract already, and Lamar Jackson's still waiting.
Really? He got drafted? Okay, go
Yeah,
ahead. I'm going to search.
Because the Cardinals drafted Josh Rosen in the same draft as Lamar Jackson, and the year after they moved on from Josh Rosen and got Kyler Murray. So I'm sure that doesn't sit well with Lamar Jackson. And I know Lamar Jackson doesn't have an agent. He represents himself, so maybe that's kind of what's been the holdup. But when Lamar Jackson sees what Kyler Murray got, and Lamar Jackson's a guy who's got an MVP and has won playoff games before, if I'm Lamar Jackson, I'm sitting there and definitely demanding a better contract than Kyler Murray got. So I think that's going to be something to look forward to, especially because he is his own agent. He represents himself. It's going to be really hard to kind of negotiate and have contract talks throughout the season without getting distracted. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see if he even holds out or anything. You just never know. But this defense is absolutely loaded. I think the secondary, last year, obviously, they had a lot of injuries, but I think healthy, they're the best secondary in the league. And then they added Kyle Hamilton on top of that. I think that's an absolute monster addition that gives them, in my opinion, the best secondary in the league still. I think they re-signed Calais Campbell. I forgot who they drafted in the second round. That's pretty. The guy from Michigan, right, with the Achilles injury. So eventually, at some point, he's going to come back. He's going to be a great addition to that defense as well. And then I kind of mentioned the offense already, but as long as you have Lamar Jackson, you get these running backs back healthy again, they're going to be an extremely dangerous offense to stop from the running aspect of it. And then I think Rashad Bateman should take another step forward, and Mark Andrews is obviously vying to be that best tight end in the league. And if he has another season like last year, we might have to have a conversation about that. But just top to bottom, I think this Ravens team is loaded. So that's why I have them as the best team in the division.
And lucky for us, they play the Jets week 1, right? Yeah. God damn it. All right, whatever. Here's hoping that the contract situation between Lamar and the Ravens doesn't work out till week 2.
Just delayed a week. Yep.
Just delay it.
We want to get paid. We're not here to advocate for guys not to get paid. We want to get paid. Just wait a week.
Yeah, but we just want the Jets to win first. But yeah, any final comments on these divisions, fellers?
I think this is gonna be one of the best divisions in the league. If Deshaun Watson is able to play.
Let's hope he doesn't play.
Yeah, of course. I don't think he deserves to play, but
yeah.
For
justice purposes.
Yeah, I think he has a chance to be one of the most fascinating divisions all season.
For sure.
A lot of storylines in the division as well.
A lot of storylines. Which is great because it gives us something to talk about.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
All
right.
Very true.
Okay. I think that'll do it for this week. Pretty stacked week. That last segment took a bit, but it's all good because we had something to say about it. Yeah. NFL season's right around the corner. Training camp started. I'm excited. A lot of movements, especially in fantasy football
season, baby.
Yeah. Me and Dame.
A lot of moves happening there.
Yeah, Dame. Yeah, They've
What?
trying to rehabilitate his image as a fantasy manager, fantasy owner.
A lot of fake news. Fake news.
Damon is blacklisted in fantasy.
For literally no reason.
Allegations running rampant on Damien. But
do we need to launch an investigation here?
you know, maybe,
Just a bad guy.
maybe. But he has the second pick in my draft that I'm with him. So, yeah.
Chris is third.
Yeah. And I thought that would be a solid pick because like I wanted to get someone, but apparently he's gonna go to Dame. Little scumbag. Anyway, yeah, Jerg, where can I find us on the socials?
Ladies and gentlemen, you guys already know you can follow us at somewhat.sports on Instagram. We are inching closer and closer to 100 followers. Every follow that you give us there is appreciated. Somewhat's based in sports on both YouTube and on Spotify. Like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Give us listens on Spotify. Rate us 5 stars. Give us some feedback. We're open to all the feedback in the world because we care about you, the Somewhat Sports viewers, who help make this podcast something fun we love to do, and help us make it worthwhile as we continue our trek here in the Somewhat Sports summer of 2022.
Beautifully said, as always, Jerg. Yeah, summer's almost actually coming to a close, actually. But that means, I mean, look,
shut up.
this in terms of sports, winter is going to be stacked, fall in the winter. But yeah, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So yeah, Jerg and Dame, phenomenal job as always this week. To all the listeners listening, if you made it this far, we appreciate the shit out of you. And until next time, peace.
Peace.